Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video, I want to quickly show you how you can get your environment set up so that you can code along inside of this course if you are on a Windows computer. Now, in the Windows computer, there's a couple different terminal options you have. The main one that I think is very useful is the one that comes integrated with Visual Studio Code. The benefit of this as well is that because I use Visual Studio Code as my editor, if you're unfamiliar with editors, you can easily use Visual Studio Code and you'll be able to follow everything that I'm doing with my editor because we both would end up using the exact same editor. So in order to use Visual Studio Code, I'm going to paste for you a link inside of your resources that you can use to get the download. So simply hit download for Windows and wait for the download to complete. Once your Visual Studio Code finishes downloading, simply go to the folder that you set it in. So in my case, it's in my downloads folder. And just simply double click to install it. Now, inside of here, you're going to be asked for a license agreement. So simply accept the agreement, and then you'll have these boxes that you can check. Now, I would probably check all the ones that are unchecked, but what this allows you to do is access Visual Studio Code through different settings on your computer so you can use it to open up your projects. Simply hit Next and then Install. Once it's finished, we can simply launch Visual Studio Code. And then inside of Visual Studio Code, you now have your editor. So, in order for you to actually open up the terminal that I have here, simply go up to the Terminal tab and hit New Terminal. And this will now open up the terminal that you have by default set up inside of your Windows computer. If you have installed other shells, you'll be able to select them from this dropdown. But in my case, I only have PowerShell, which is the default shell that comes with the computer. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to actually install a different one called Git Bash. Now, with Git Bash, you are now able to access the underlying Git projects and Git folders that we will use throughout this course because we want to push to GitHub. So use the link that I provided for you and simply hit download. Now this will download this the same way that we just downloaded Visual Studio Code and just save it wherever you want to. Once it's finished downloading, go to the folder where it's downloaded to and simply run it as well. Now this will ask you if you allow it to make changes. Now you want to hit yes because this will install Git Bash instead of PowerShell, which comes with much easier to understand controls. Now here it'll ask you if you want it to allow you to install different things. And in my case, I just want to add another icon on the desktop so it's easy to launch. And then by default, it'll ask you what editor you want to use. So usually Vim is the one that most people are comfortable with, or Visual Studio Code, which we just downloaded, if you want it to be the one that opens whenever you want to modify files and text files. But we'll explore that a little later. For now, I'm just going to stick to Vim and hit Next. And then I want to run Git from my command line. And then I want to also use OpenSSL in order to validate my Git. You can just hit Next for this. And for here, you can also use Git Bash's own Minty terminal emulator. So this one is entirely up to you. I personally, I'm going to use the Git provided Minty, and then I'm just going to hit Next again. Experimental is up to you whether or not you want to opt in or not to these new commands. It does not really matter. I'm not going to opt in, and I'm just going to wait for the install to finish. Now, once everything's installed, simply hit Finish, and then go back to your Visual Studio Code and close it. So we need to actually access the new terminal because we have a new shell. So in order to do this, just reopen Visual Studio Code after you've closed it. And then inside of this dropdown, what we're going to do is we are going to hit Select Default Shell. And we are going to choose our git bash. Now this will switch our main terminal whenever we add a new one or whenever we open our terminal to use our new git bash shell. And the way to do that is now you simply hit this plus icon, which we'll see is now bash, and then you just close your old PowerShell by switching back to it and hitting the garbage can. And now you have bash set up as your main terminal. Now if you see these colors when you switch to bash, that means that you are running the Minty emulator, if you remember in those settings when we were installing git bash. So this is actually a quality of life emulator. It just makes different things in the terminal prettier as well as easier to understand and reason about. You can of course run other emulators if you want, such as Z Shell, which is what I have when you watch my course. But in our case, Minty is fine for Windows. Now, what we need to install next is Node. Node is actually what's going to allow us to run JavaScript inside of our terminal. What we have to do is we have to go to this website of Node.js and simply download the installer equivalent to whatever bit your Windows is. So mine is 64. I'm just going to download the 64-bit one. Once it's finished downloading, open the folder and then just run the Node installer. Now, Node is what we need in order for us to run our JavaScript, as well as manage our JavaScript packages for all of the applications that we'll be building. So simply hit Next, accept the license and agreement, install Node, and then hit Next again, and finally install. Now, Node also comes with NPM, which is Node Package Manager. And we want to hit yes here as well when it asks if it allows us to make changes to our device. And Node Package Manager is what allows us to manage different versions of Node. Now, the versions of Node all come with different features, and Node is always being updated. But we want to just use the latest version of Node at the time of when you watch this video. And usually that's what this link will recommend you as well. It'll try and give you the latest LTS version. So simply wait until our Node is finished installing. And once it's finished, simply hit finish. Now we have to make sure that Node and NPM are properly installed on our computer. So the way we do that is we just have to close our Visual Studio Code and reopen it again, because we need to see and load a new version of our terminal. And once our terminal comes in, we simply type in node-v, and we should see some number. So this will tell us the version of Node that we currently have installed. If we hit npm-v, we'll see the version of npm we have installed. Now that you have npm and Node, you can actually run through this course. The only thing is that I use Yarn as my package manager instead of npm. Now, Yarn and npm are pretty much the same thing. The only thing was that there was a period of time where npm was kind of buggy. And what Facebook did was they created Yarn so that it was a more efficient package manager. But npm has since then caught up. Now, you can easily Google all of the commands that you need that are the same replacements for what's used in Yarn if you wanted to just use npm. But if you want to use Yarn, I'm going to show you how to download Yarn. So simply copy the resource that I've given you inside of your resource folder that says Yarn, and then paste it into your browser. And once you're on this page, make sure your operating system is Windows and your version is stable. Then you just click Download Installer. Now you'll see here that it says that we can only do this after we've installed Node.js, which we just did. So with this, once it's finished, we simply go to where we've installed it and run the installer. We're going to accept the license, hit next, and then finally hit install. We want to allow it to make changes, and we finish. And now we need to go back to our Visual Studio Code, close it again, and rerun it, because we need to make sure that we have the version of Yarn installed on our computer. So what we can do inside of our terminal is just type yarn-v once it's finished loading, and we should see the version that we just installed. And with this, your environment is now set up for the rest of the course. So I'll see you in the next lesson.